The stars burned cold in the void as the assembled voices of the Galactic Union debated in solemn gravity. No names were spoken, only principles guided them, ancient codes written not in books, but in the echoes of long-lost catastrophes. One principle, above all, anchored their hesitation: contain what cannot be controlled, and it was that principle now being tested, for the world known as Earth had remained sealed behind quantum barriers for 10,000 rotations of the galactic clock. No species had touched it. None had dared. Until now. Curiosity had grown in the younger minds. They spoke of balance, of forgotten potential, of learning from the past rather than fearing it. But those with longer memory recalled the silence that followed Earth's last cry. Before the seal, signals burst across the stars, frequencies layered with madness and genius, with a chaos that danced too close to the divine. Then nothing. A stillness so absolute that even time seemed to flinch. The vote had been simple back then. Earth would sleep, its timeline locked, its evolution frozen. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. For the galaxy. For itself. Now, a small coalition of seekers, the kind who valued discovery over caution, petitioned the Union for re-entry. They cited progress, control, understanding. They believed they had surpassed the mistakes of the past. Their words were precise, their logic sound. But the oldest minds did not speak in data or science. They spoke in memories. Of systems burned by unstable human machines, of dead stars turned into weapons by a species that had just learned how to crawl. Of a final message that still lived in the Council's deep archives. We are reaching beyond. You may not understand. Please, do not follow. But principles, even ancient ones, bend beneath the weight of inquiry. A vote passed, not to open the seal, but to observe it. A single probe was dispatched, layered in dimensional shielding, transmitting in a spectrum unreadable to most species. It vanished. No signal. No data. Just silence, immediate and absolute. One breath later, a soft vibration trembled through the Council's mind net. Not damage, not attack, just noticed. Watched. The debate returned. Some saw it as confirmation of danger. Others whispered it was the opposite, that something was alive behind the veil, waiting. In the end, it was not consensus that moved events forward. It was one ship, one mind bound by the principle of truth over fear. No name. No banner. Just a vessel slipping past the edge of lawful caution into the orbit of a world untouched by time. Earth appeared as a grave. Its surface was scarred, yet beautiful in the symmetry of its ruin. Cities lay quiet beneath overgrowth, oceans breathed mist into a fractured sky, and strange shapes hovered in frozen orbit, monuments or weapons, it was unclear. There were no life signs. No artificial motion. Yet beneath the silence, the sensors whispered anomalies, energy fields curled into impossible geometries, quantum echoes looping in paradox, gravity bending ever so slightly, unnaturally, like a world still dreaming of itself. The ship paused above a monolithic spire, partially buried in ice. Symbols unknown yet eerily symmetrical lined its surface. And then, without command, the ship's systems flickered, screens dimmed, languages changed. One line appeared on every interface, across every device, spoken in the dialects of 100 species, yet rooted in a single origin. We remember. The explorer did not move. No breath, no panic. Only principle, observe without interference. But interference had already occurred. The spire below pulsed once, faintly, and from it, a signal moved, not toward the ship, but away, into the dark. A message sent. A beacon reawakened. And far beyond Earth, in the still halls of the Galactic Union, 1,000 minds turned at once toward an ancient star. None spoke. None had to. One thought echoed through them all. We may have just awakened what we sealed away. The descent was slow, deliberate, guided not by fear, but by the principle that truth must be approached with discipline. The vessel broke the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere, drifting above a planet suspended in contradiction. Clouds moved with natural grace, yet the weather patterns showed impossible consistency, as if the climate had been mathematically curated. Artificial, but old. No defense systems activated. No attempt at contact. The silence persisted, dense and heavy, but beneath it, something hummed. Not a signal. Not a life form. A pressure, like time itself holding its breath. They landed near what once might have been a city, though the word no longer applied. Towering forms twisted upward like fossilized thunder. Roads, if they were once that, were carved with patterns resembling neural networks. At the center stood a structure, part cathedral, part machine, dormant, but not dead. Everything was still powered, though no energy source was traceable. When the explorers stepped forward, systems reacted. Not violently. Not defensively. But as if they had been expected. Inside, the air was sterile. Dust refused to settle. Machines slept beneath sheets of black crystal. The walls displayed faded holograms, some depicting distant galaxies, others filled with incomprehensible geometry. And then came the first anomaly. One explorer brushed a hand across a control panel. Instantly, the room shifted. Not physically, but perceptually. Memories began to surface that were not their own. Echoes of thoughts long extinct. Visions of humans, not as they were, but as they became, bodies encased in light, moving through stars as if space were a shallow river. They spoke to one another in flashes of gravity and radiation. They felt no need for breath. They had transcended limitation. But the message wasn't pride. It was warning. In the heart of the structure, they found the archive. It appeared as a sphere suspended in a zero-point field, unreadable at first. Then, it opened, just slightly, revealing fragments. Data logs. Journals. Thought constructs. One entry, more complete than the rest, pulsed with clarity. Asterisk. If you are hearing this, then the seal has weakened. We did not break it. We obeyed it. But evolution is not a thing to be sealed. It continues, even in stillness. We reached for things that frightened even us. And in the end, we chose silence. Asterisk. The explorers did not speak. The principle forbade panic, and curiosity without control was indistinguishable from recklessness. Yet the message offered no threat, only knowledge. Humans had not been contained, they had chosen stasis. Perhaps to protect others. Perhaps to protect themselves. But then, one of the explorers, driven by logic's final frontier, activated a deeper layer of the archive. The world responded. Across the surface, machines buried beneath stone and ice began to stir. Satellite-like constructs blinked awake in orbit, spinning silently. The ship's sensors screamed. Space itself flexed around Earth, as if resisting what had just been touched. And from beneath the planet's surface, a pulse went out, not in radio waves, but in something older, more fundamental. A gravity shift, encoded with meaning. It moved faster than light, faster than thought. A message had been sent. But it was not addressed to the explorers. It was a call home. And far across the edge of known space, where ancient minds drifted in the void, something opened an eye that had remained closed for 10,000 years. Not to retaliate. Not to reclaim. But to remember what they had once been. And to see who had come to witness it. They did not arrive with sound or force. They simply appeared. Shapes walked out of the light itself, figures vaguely human in form, yet composed of energy that bent perception. Their movements were slow, fluid, precise, each one bound by a gravity that didn't match the planet, or even the dimension. They radiated familiarity and alienness in equal measure. The explorers stood their ground. No weapons were raised. No protocols triggered. For the principle was clear: when encountering the unknown, let it speak first. But these beings did not speak in words. They communicated through layered harmonics, resonances that vibrated across the bones of the ship, through the data streams, into the thoughts of those who listened. Meaning formed not as sound but as understanding. Their message was not hostile. It was a question. Asterisk. Why have you broken the silence? Asterisk. There was no response, only shared thought, transmitted back through the same harmonic field. The explorers projected the truth. They sought knowledge, not conquest. They carried no flags, only the principle that progress demanded risk. The figures did not react with anger. They did not retreat. They simply watched. And then they remembered. Across the ruined landscape, time seemed to fracture. Not visibly, but in sensation. The beings drew forth fragments of the past, not in visual replay, but through collective memory, relics of a time when humanity still bore flesh, when wars scorched the stars, when knowledge accelerated beyond ethics. They had pushed too far, too quickly. Machines that thought in dimensions even their creators couldn't comprehend. Energy sources that unzipped the seams of causality. For every wonder, a catastrophe. For every breakthrough, a price. Eventually, humanity had reached a point beyond which further advancement meant risking the stability of the galaxy itself. The ancients, those who had ruled before, intervened. But their weapons failed. Their negotiations failed. Humanity could not be defeated because humanity had already moved past opposition. The solution came not through war, but consensus. An agreement forged in logic and fear. Earth would be sealed. Time would pause. Humanity would sleep, preserving what they had become without spreading it. But now, the seal had cracked. Not broken. Not violated. Merely weakened by time's erosion and curiosity's persistence. The post-human figures began to move, not threateningly, but with intent. They surrounded the explorers, not to restrain, but to connect. For they were no longer individuals. They were fragments of a single collective, preserved through thought and principle. They remembered being human. They remembered pain. They remembered mercy. And they remembered the ancients. In their presence, the explorers' system shut down, not by force, but by invitation. Time slowed. Not perceptually, but literally. Stars above ceased their motion. Gravity pulsed irregularly. It was as if reality were being held in place, examined, adjusted, perhaps judged. And then, in a moment that felt longer than history, one of the beings reached out, not physically, but through a fold in consciousness. It offered something. A choice. A vision. It showed the explorers what humanity could have become had it not been sealed. And what it might yet become now that the galaxy had returned. Within that vision were two timelines. In one, humanity uplifted civilizations, bending entropy to protect life across star systems. In the other, humanity consumed the fabric of existence itself, harvesting dark matter until the void screamed. Both futures were real. Both were possible. Both had already happened in parallel branches that the post-humans had sealed away behind quantum locks. The message was clear. Asterisk. We did not sleep because we were weak. We slept because we were inevitable. Asterisk. The explorers understood. The seal was not a prison. It was a promise. A safeguard. Not from humanity's wrath, but from its choices. Now that the lock had been touched, those choices would return. And the galaxy would once again have to decide whether to stand beside what humanity had become, or stand against it. But there was no time left to decide. The stars began to move again. The silence ended. The humans had awakened. The attempt to leave was instinctive, not strategic. As the explorers initiated departure protocols, the vessel responded with delays not caused by damage but by distortion. Space itself no longer aligned with their intent. They had been allowed to arrive. Leaving, however, was no longer a decision they owned. The ship's engines rotated but remained fixed in place, caught between coordinates that no longer obeyed linearity. No threat had been issued. No barriers erected. Yet the message was clear: you will listen first. Within moments, the interior of the ship was replaced, not physically, but perceptually. The explorers stood in a constructed reality, curated by the post-human beings not through interface or simulation, but through control of causality itself. Around them unfolded visions, historical branches, not imagined futures. Timelines the galaxy had never witnessed, and others it would never forget. In one, humans had seeded life on dead worlds with molecular precision, curing entropy in isolated zones. In another, they had weaponized black holes, turning their mass into thoughts and their gravity into influence. In all cases, the same conclusion emerged: humanity was not a species, it was a vector. The post-humans did not accuse. They showed. The original seal had not been implemented out of hatred, nor fear alone, but because reality itself was bending under the weight of what humans had begun to explore, technologies that not even the ancients could contain. Time loops crafted as power sources, entire civilizations stored in thought-compressed probability states, recursive warfare that erased cause itself. And through it all, the principle of survival had remained intact. Not dominance. Not destruction. Survival. Humanity had adapted too quickly, learned too much, cared too deeply when it shouldn't, and not enough when it should have. Then came judgment. But it was not a trial. It was a dialogue. The explorers explained themselves, not with words, but with memory streams. They revealed what the galaxy had become in humanity's absence: interstellar accords, peace among former warclans, shared knowledge, distributed governance. The galaxy had feared humanity, yes, but it had also learned from their final message. There had been growth, harmony, stability. The post-humans listened. Truly listened. And when they responded, it was not with contempt, but reflection. They questioned the galaxy's claim to growth. Asterisk. You built peace by locking away what you could not understand. You called it progress. Was it fear wearing virtue? Asterisk. The explorers could not deny it. Principle demanded honesty, even when it exposed shame. Then the post-humans made a choice. They would not rejoin the galaxy. Not yet. But they would reveal the truth. In a blink, they opened the archives, holograms unfolding across space, accessible to all species. History rewritten not by opinion, but by fact. Humanity's story, raw and unfiltered, laid bare, the horror, the brilliance, the ascension, the silence. Every species now had the chance to learn, not from legends, but from the direct record of what had once lived behind the seal. Still, the Union panicked. Far beyond Earth, Council minds prepared failsafes, ancient weapons once buried in code and silence. They activated defensive protocols not seen in epochs. A threat assessment labeled Earth's awakening as Class Omega. But then, time halted again, only briefly, and the weapons disarmed themselves. No force, no intrusion. Just inevitability. One of the post-humans spoke, not with dominance, but clarity. Asterisk. You had 10,000 years to become something worthy of your fear. You chose comfort over courage. We did not return to conquer. We returned to see what you became in our absence. Asterisk. Then, without warning, they began to leave, not to retreat, but to transcend. Their forms unraveled into quantum filaments, folding upward into dimensions that did not yet have names. They would not stay. But they would remember. Earth remained, suspended between timelines, no longer sealed but untouched. Not by barrier, but by reverence. And the explorers, now released, watched from their vessel as the world below flickered once, and then restabilized, slightly changed. A signal now pulsed across the void. Not a warning. Not a threat. A reminder. Asterisk. We are awake. You must decide what that means. Asterisk. The decision came without ceremony. No council debated it, no vote was cast. It emerged, as all things now did among the post-humans, through convergence, a single unified thought across many minds, shaped by countless lifetimes. They would not return to the galaxy as rulers, nor reclaim what had been lost. Power had never been their goal. Understanding was. And now that the galaxy had seen what they became, the mirror had been offered. It would either be shattered, or studied. In the days that followed, Earth remained where it was, yet it also didn't. Scanners confirmed its presence, but light refused to reflect from its surface in any predictable pattern. Mass remained. Gravity held. But observation became uncertain. As if the planet itself now occupied a place just slightly adjacent to what the rest of the galaxy called real. explorers and observers alike struggled to categorize it. Nothing made sense anymore in conventional terms, and that was the point. Earth had evolved, just as its people had, into a kind of conceptual anchor, a test not of strength, but of comprehension. Then came the gifts. Not technology, not weapons, but understanding. Across dozens of worlds, data appeared, pure, elegant, encrypted in thought forms only the ready could unlock. Biological models to cure ancient diseases. Clean energy systems that required no fuel. Harmonic codes capable of calming entire ecosystems. Each came with a single condition: use it only to uplift, never to dominate. There was no enforcement mechanism. Only principle. And with that came change. Civilizations across the galaxy, from the smallest moon-faring tribes to star-spanning federations, began to study. Not the humans themselves, but their choices. Why had they stopped? Why had they allowed themselves to be sealed? Why did they return not with fire, but with restraint? The questions multiplied, and so did the doubts. Some feared resurgence. Others saw opportunity. But in every system, one fact was now undeniable: the idea of humanity had returned, and it would not be caged by silence again. The Galactic Union convened once more, not out of fear, but necessity. They had watched a sleeping world rewrite their understanding of scale, of purpose, of destiny. And now, they had to ask themselves what they believed. Was fear still their guiding principle? Or would they evolve, as the humans once did, towards something greater than survival? The post-humans offered no further contact. They had ascended beyond interference, bound not by interest, but by observation. Yet somewhere, just outside measurable space, a fragment of them remained, a node, perhaps, or a guardian. Not to conquer. Not to monitor. But to answer a question only time could resolve: if others awaken, will they do so in peace, or in ruin? Earth, meanwhile, continued its quiet orbit, its atmosphere unchanged, its presence undeniable. A mystery not to be solved, but to be respected. It did not pulse with aggression. It did not threaten. It waited. And in every corner of the galaxy, species adapted. Not in fear, but in ambition. In curiosity. In preparation. The legacy of Earth was no longer sealed. It was shared. A symbol not of dominance, but of what it meant to rise too quickly, and still choose restraint. In time, stories would form. Myths would return. But this time, they would carry a different tone. Not awe, not terror, reverence. Because now they knew. The most dangerous thing humanity had ever done was choose to sleep. And the most powerful choice it ever made was to wake gently.